Of the Body Condemned, Chapter 3, Remedy, by ladyofrosefire and sparxwrites. The healing begins. Content tags for graphic depictions of violence, execution, road hauling, torture, aftermath of torture, flogging, hanging, strangulation, gibbets, vomiting, urination, fighting, rescue missions, crying, healing, hurt/comfort, hair petting, nightmares, emotional, hurt/comfort, womp, dislocations, bruises, trauma, near death, tenderness, physiotherapy, and hand-holding. Caduceus has barely finished asking for help before Ford comes to kneel on the other side of Essek's prone form.
What do you need me to do?
He says, soft, as though they are attending to a deathbed. Perhaps they are. Caleb tries not to think about that.
Lay on hands.
Caduceus replies, equally soft, folding his cloak into a pillow.
He has a bad infection and it's stopping me from healing him. I want to save everything I have for fixing, all this.
Hey, Linsforth says Yas is visiting Alara. I'm going to ask him if we can stay, if he has anything that might help.
Jester steps towards the door, her eyes still on Essek. That's a good idea, Bo replies. At her sides, her hands clench into fists. I don't think we can move him.
No.
Caduceus agrees. He sounds as close to stressed as Caleb's ever heard. It's frightening, and he never wants to hear it again. The door opens and shuts with a soft click. Ford presses unsteady hands to Essek's chest, sea green light spilling from his palms. The sound Essek makes is cracked, painful. But when it ends, the feverish cast is gone from his half-open eyes, and his wounds weep only blood. Slowly, he blinks again, eyelids fluttering and eyes unfocused, but no longer glassy. His lips part a little further, to draw in a hitching breath, and he moans almost inaudibly with the movement. Fuck! Bo hisses. His face! She gathers herself. Caduceus! His jaw! Essek's whole face shifts, in a way faces should not. His cheeks and the line of his jaw wrong in a subtle, awful sort of way.
I see it.
Caduceus replies. He sets large hands on Essek's face, feeling along the distended jaw until he finds the correct points. Caleb looks away after that, just for a moment. He does not see the way Caduceus moves the bone, but he hears the sharp sound of it going back into place. He hears Essek's strangled cry. He quiets a moment later, breath still ragged, but drier. Caduceus wipes the blood and spit away from Essek's chin and cheeks with gentle hands, magic still playing around his fingertips. He pauses with his hands hovering over Essek's shoulders. The joints are distended, swollen, dislocated in a way obvious enough for even Caleb's inexpert eyes to notice.
Can you, get Jester back for me, Caleb? I'm gonna need a little help.
Of course.
He takes out the wire and points it in the most likely direction, relaying the message without taking his eyes from Essek's bruised face. A moment passes before he hears Jester's soft,
Okay.
She re-enters the room a minute later and goes immediately to kneel beside Caduceus.
Hey, Essek. We're gonna make you better, okay?
Her voice shakes, though she tries to hide it.
Caduceus?
I'll hold him steady.
He says, touching Jester's shoulder.
I need you to put his shoulders back together. Be careful and go slow.
If not, she could easily break his arm trying to force it. Caleb saw it happen once when Eodwulf was injured in training. They attempted to fix it themselves and only succeeded in making it worse. For a moment, the world seems underwater. The room spins, time goes loose, liquid, and Caleb feels unmoored in a sea of memory and horror. Then he sucks in a deep breath, holds it, lets it out. The room comes, unpleasantly, back into focus. Jester takes a deep breath, and all of them watch silently as she carefully, slowly straightens Essek's arm, gasping softly as she tries to find a patch of unbroken skin large enough to hold without hurting.
Sorry,
She whispers, then pulls. Essek screams, but Caduceus' hold on him keeps him from thrashing. He goes still a moment later, a high, rasping whine slipping from his throat along with what might be words. Bo, shaking, takes half a step forward. Can he hear? She switches languages then, saying something in what Caleb assumes is undercommon, low and urgent. Essek does not respond. His whining tapers off into gasping, his chest heaving shallowly for breath. Jester says, desperately, cheers on her cheeks and pops his other shoulder back into his joint. Again, he screams, though he does not try to move this time beyond a bone-deep tremor that runs through him in long waves.
There you go.
Caduceus soothes, pouring magic into his shoulders, into his chest and lungs. For a moment, it glows so brightly that Caleb can see each of Essek's ribs backlit behind his skin.
They really did a number on you, didn't they?
The light sinks deeper, and Essek sobs, coughs, and twitches as though he means to curl around his stomach. Jester shushes him gently and pets his hair with one hand. The other wipes the tear from her cheeks, businesslike and surreptitious.
It's okay. We'll make you better. Caduceus, his hands next. Do we have anything for the pain?
I'm afraid not.
He frowns.
Let me...
He lays a hand against Essek's brow.
This will help.
Essek fights it, brow furrowing. Then the spell takes hold, and he goes slack and pliant, fear and tension draining from his face.
I'll cast it again in a minute.
Caleb snaps his fingers, and Frumpkin appears by Essek's head. The cat begins to lick the sweat and blood from his hair, purring loudly. Caleb remains by the door, arms tightly crossed. The room is starting to swim again. He's not sure if it's blood loss this time or the disassociation back with a vengeance. Perhaps both. Essek whimpers with each bone they slot back into place, despite the artificial calming of his emotions. It's delicate work, piercing his ruined hands back together, straightening the long, elegant fingers, making the bones whole again. Caduceus keeps the calm on Essek for as long as he can, but it runs out with 4 digits left to set. Jester pins his hand down while Caduceus finishes the work, and Essek chokes back cries as though he expects them to hurt him for making noise. By the time they're finished, there are tears on Jester's face again, and Essek trembles in the fine, barely visible way that speaks to bone-deep hurt and exhaustion. Even Caduceus looks a little unsteady, the most visibly rattled the furbolg has ever been.
There.
He says, heaving a deep breath and stroking a matted curl of white hair back from Essek's forehead.
That's, enough for one evening, I think.
That's it? Demands Bo. There is still so much damage, the abrasions and whip marks and bruises and more. It hardly seems as though they've done anything at all. You can't! There's nothing else you can do? Caduceus hums softly, his hands drifting to brush over Frumpkin's fur where the cat is still curled up by Essek's ear.
There's only so much magic the body can take in one go,
he says, the calm in his voice belied by the tightness around his eyes and mouth. He looks angry. Not at Bo, but angry all the same.
Especially when you've starved it and exhausted it. Broken it and healed it for weeks before. The rest of this, it'll keep for a night. We'll get him some bandages and let him sleep and fix him up in the morning. Besides,
he adds, flexing his hands with a faint grimace and finally looking up at the worried 9 clustered around him.
I'm about tapped, I'm afraid.
I have a little more.
Jester offers, small and quiet. She sniffs and goes to wipe at her eyes with the back of her hand, stopping as she catches the sight of blood on it.
Why don't you help Caleb?
Caduceus suggests.
Get those arrows out. I'll start a prayer for everyone else.
They find a quiet landing on the stairway, and Jester helps Caleb remove his coat.
Oh.
She bites hard at her lower lip.
Oh, Caleb. Okay, we really need to get something for the pain, because, this is going to hurt a little bit.
Bracing a hand on Caleb's chest, she draws the bolt carefully, slowly from Caleb's stomach. Blood flows freely after it. Caleb gags and curls around the injury, tasting bile and copper on the back of his tongue. A moment later, the cool mint of her magic chases it away. The arrow in his shoulder is easier to remove, having punched all the way through to emerge just above his shoulder blade. No wonder he'd been having trouble moving that arm. The bolt in his thigh scrapes against bone as she draws it out, and Caleb allows himself a single scream, teeth gritted, into clenched fists before Jester soothes that hurt as well. Caleb heaves in a few ragged breaths, hands braced on the edge of the staircase railing. When the urge to scream again subsides, he looks to where Jester sits beside him.
Thank you,
he says, voice ragged. Jester's lower lip wobbles, and she bursts into tears. Without a word, Caleb holds out his arms. She falls into them, face buried against his shoulder, hands curled into tight fists against his back. Her whole body shakes with the force of her sobs. He hesitates a moment before stroking her shoulder blade, carefully, the way he would pet Frumpkin. It seems to work. The shaking eases, and her breathing steadies, although she continues to cry into the collar of his shirt.
I hate them.
She gasps.
I hate them. How could they? They hurt him. They hurt him so bad I don't.
She hiccups and then dissolves into sobs again. Words insensible against Caleb's neck. Caleb keeps holding her, a knot in his throat until her sobs give way to sniffles, and keeps holding her after those stop, too. She keeps leaning on him. He keeps rubbing circles into her back.
Why would they do that?
Jester asks, finally, almost inaudible. There is an answer, which she would hate, so Caleb says nothing. She likely knows already, as it is. It will not help her to know about capital punishments and theories of deterrence. It will not help her to know that there are people out there who enjoy hurting others just to hear them scream. He stays silent, dries his eyes as subtly as he can, and waits with her until she is ready to go back into the teleportation room. Inside, they find the others cleaning up the blood from the floor and their armor. Essek lies on a bedroll in the corner with Frumpkin tucked, purring against his side, his face bruised and drawn, unconscious. Someone, while they were out, dressed him in spare clothes. One of Caleb's extra shirts, Beau's reversible coat, and Fort's pants, too large at the waist and too long. Yasha's shawl cushions his head, softening the press of the flagstone floor against bruised, bloody cheeks. The others lay out their blankets on the other side of the room. Caduceus offers them each a cup of tea, stirring a generous spoonful of honey into Jester's before handing it to her. She gulps it down. Caleb sips his as he sets up his bedroll next to Vet's, and then lays the alarm thread across the door.
I'm gonna wait up with him for a while,
Caduceus whispers, settling beside Essek's sleeping form. The breath still wheezes in Essek's bruised throat, shallow and painful sounding with every inhale.
just in case. I think you'll be alright, though.
I'll go next.
Jester offers. She fluffs her pillow half-heartedly before lying down. She's still sniffling, on and off, whenever she catches sight of Essek. Beau turns onto her other side and reaches out to take Jester's hand.
I'll take the morning watch then.
Caleb keeps his eyes fixed on his spool of thread as he lays it out in careful inches.
Wake me when it's time.
They go to sleep uneasily, all of them listening on edge for the rhythm of Essek's slow, strained breaths to falter. One by one, though, they drop off. Beth, Ford, Yasha, Beau, Jester.
Go to sleep, Mr. Caleb.
Caduceus rumbles eventually into the darkness.
I'll wake you if there's trouble.
It takes Caleb's eyes a long time to close, nonetheless. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Make sure to go check out this fanfic on AO3, the whole, the written version by the lovely sparxwrites and Lady of Frosefire. We'll see you in 2 weeks with the next part. Stay tuned. I'm just jamming to these beats. Follow us on all our things if you want. Rewind and replay. You know where to find us. Thank you for your support. Have a good one.